Hey, welcome to Board Gems. I'm your host, Daryl. In this video series, I like to talk about older board games, I like to talk about whether they're still gems or not. I'm going to talk about a game today that's not that old. I think the first edition came out around 2008, but it's definitely kind of forgotten about. It's a cooperative game, and this is a bit of a unique cooperative game. It's called Red November. It's designed by Bruno Faidutti, famed French designer Bruno Faidutti, and Jeff Gontier. It was published by Fantasy Flight Games in 2008 in their Silver Line series, box size here. But then again in 2011 in their revised Silver Line, which was in this size box. Look at this tiny little box. People are going to love that. But it's not a card game. It's a proper board game. So this has a tiny little board. Yet plays 1 to 8 players. You need at least 3 pawns in play in the game. But one player can control 3 or 2 can control 2, like that. The game can take anywhere between 45 minutes to 2 hours. You're on a submarine, and a whole bunch of crazy, terrible things are happening on the submarine. Rooms are coming on fire, other rooms are springing leaks and are flooding. The submarine is sinking, and we're getting slowly crushed, running out of oxygen. There's probably a giant squid out there somewhere that's going to destroy us. And it's all about surviving 1 hour in game time before help arrives. A simulated real-time game in that actions you do in the game take a certain amount of minutes, and minutes are recorded on a track, what designers might call the Prince track, named after Peter Prince, who was the designer of the first game to feature such a track, which is Thebes. So in this game, you have to fix parts of the sub, and that will take certain amounts of minutes. But then as you do these actions and you spend minutes, you're moving along this track, and at regular intervals, you're going to have to reveal new events, new terrible things that can happen in the sub. The original inspiration of this was a real-life submarine disaster that happened in around the year 2000, I think, about the Kursk, a submarine that sank to the bottom of the ocean. People didn't die right away. They were trapped in this submarine. And people tried to save them and couldn't, and everybody on the submarine died. I suppose it's understandable that Fantasy Flight would take that and go, okay, but we're not going to actually make it about the Kursk, okay? Because that's a weirdly grim, depressing topic. We're Fantasy Flight, let's fantasy it up. But it's a submarine. Well, what kind of fantasy species does submarines? None of them, as far as I know, but gnomes are kind of known to be inventors, tinkerers. Let's make them gnomes operating a submarine. And in a nod to the original, let's put some Russian theming in there, like calling it the Red November, a nod to the Red October, also a nod to the fact that isn't October November in the... Like October in the Russian calendar is like November in the... Anyway, so there's still Russian theming, but they're Russian gnomes. It's weird, but if you know the history behind the game, or if you understand the inspiration behind it, it kind of makes sense. So let me show you how it plays. This is tricky. I have found when I've taught this game that I can't just do a data dump. Just tell you all the things and expect you to know them all, understand them all, remember them all. This game, in my opinion, is best taught by example. That does mean that the how to play is really long. I apologize, but I have taught this game a number of times. In my experience, just trying to teach the rules without seeing how anything works in practice is useless. You need to see how it works. So this how to play is not a rules dump. It's actually like, oh, let's just play like the first half dozen turns, and I'll talk through it, and you'll see how it works that way. Anyway, a long time from now, after that how to play, I'll come back. I'll talk to you why I might still think it's a gem. To set up the game, place the board on the table between the players. If you're playing with fewer than 3 players, then some people are going to need to control more than one. I'm going to set it up for a 3-player game, which is the fewest official number allowed. Give each player in their player color 1 gnome card This shows them when they are fully sober and ready to work. The flip side will show various stages of inebriation. Everybody starts off sober. Get the matching gnome pawn, and each player is going to roll the 10-sided die. There are 10 rooms in the submarine, each numbered, and this result is where your pawn will start the game. So that's a 9, so this pawn's going to start here. Might as well do the other two. And pawns can start in the same room, that's fine. Each player also has a time tracker. This track around the board is the time tracker. The time trackers will start at a certain space based on number of players. So for 3 players, we're going to put them here and stack them in a random order. In this second edition, there is room to put the markers on the board, but it tends to obscure these stars and other symbols. And it's important to be able to see those. So you should actually leave them off the board. Just be aware that if you jostle the board a bit, these pieces can get moved around. So be careful with that. These 3 wooden markers go onto these 3 tracks on the lowest space. These are 3 ways that the submarine can be destroyed. If the marker ever reaches here, then there's no more oxygen in the submarine, and all the submariners die. If this marker reaches here, then the heat is too extreme and the submariners cannot survive. And this is the pressure track. So the submarine has fallen too deep and has been crushed. There are other ways a submarine can be destroyed as well, including a kraken and a missile launch, but we'll get to those. There's an extra time tracker that's white. Just leave that nearby. This is going to track the time used by each player on their turn. I'll get into more details later, but in general, whoever is furthest back on the time track is the player that goes next. In the case of a tie, it's whoever's on top. In this case, green will go first, and green will do actions that use up time, and this marker is going to go along the track. And then once green is finished with their turn, then this tracker is going to catch up and do any of the events that happen along the track. Near the board, you can keep the die, as well as various tokens. These come out for timed events. This shows the flooding of a particular room. If a token is like this, that means that this room is partially flooded, but you can still enter and do actions, it just takes longer. This one means it's high water, and you can't do anything in there. In fact, you could easily drown if you're stuck in there. Also, rooms can be on fire. Isn't that great? And also, these are hatches between the rooms, and these hatches can get blocked, and you would need an action to unblock them. But none of these start on the board, just keep them nearby. There are 2 decks of cards in the second edition. In the first edition, this deck of cards, which is items, are actually square tokens. But in this edition, they're cards. First, you're going to search the deck and take out 6 grog cards. This grog can be obtained in the captain's quarters right at the front of the sub. He's got a hidden stash of grog. The rest of the item cards are shuffled up, placed near the board, but give 2 to each player. And the other deck is event cards. Now, 1 card in here is a kraken attack. So you're going to have to find that. If it's mixed in with all the other cards, you're going to have to search the deck for the kraken. Here it is, the kraken card. So keep that separate for now and shuffle up the rest of the event cards. When this deck runs out, then you're going to shuffle up all the discards into a new deck, but you're going to include the kraken. So then the kraken may appear later in the game, but never early. That should be it. I think we're ready to begin. The submarine's got a lot of problems, I'm going to be honest with you, and we, or as many of us as possible, are going to try to survive for 60 minutes. Yeah, this shows the number 60, goes all the way around to 0. So you have to survive an hour in game time. So you have to keep the submarine operational and as many gnomes as possible alive until all the time markers reach this spot, at which point they are rescued. It is a cooperative game. There is kind of a funny rule that throws a monkey wrench into that, but I'll explain that later. Players take turns,
but not in clockwise order. It's always whoever is furthest back in the time track. Right now we all start farthest back, so we always go in order from top to bottom. So green's going to perform a turn, and it's going to take a certain number of minutes in game time. Let's say this amount. Then it would be orange's turn. Let's say orange did a smaller action, something like that. Then it would be blue's turn. Let's say blue does a really long action. It ends up around here. Then it'll be orange's turn again. On your turn, you can move around the sub, which will take some time, and then you will do an action. You can choose to do no action, but even doing no action costs 1 minute in game terms. Players can drink grog, which can help them with actions. It can give them some additional bravery, but it makes them increasingly drunk. And if you drank grog on your turn, then you will have to do what's called a feint check to see whether you pass out. As you're doing actions, during your turn, this marker is going to be moving up. And the very last thing you do on your turn is have your own time marker catch up to the temporary marker. And then any of these events that the marker passes will have to be executed. So let's talk about moving around the sub. The submarine is divided into 10 rooms, and there are hatches connecting the rooms. Moving into another room requires opening the hatch and then walking through it, and the act of opening the hatch takes 1 minute. Assuming none of the rooms are flooded, then movement is pretty quick. You simply need to take 1 minute to open up a hatch, but then it's free to walk into that room. So if this gnome wanted to go into this room, it would take 1 minute to open this hatch and 1 minute to open this hatch. And that's 2 minutes. Now, however, rooms can be flooded. If a room is at low water, then entering the room will actually cost you an additional minute. Everything involving this room will take extra time because you have to wade through water. It slows you down. So to enter this room would actually cost 2 minutes, 1 to open the hatch and 1 to enter the room that's partly flooded. Rooms can also be at high water. If you open a hatch between a room that is at high water and a room that is not flooded at all, then they will both be at low water. So the water will transfer between the rooms. But now you can walk through both of them. It just takes longer. Rooms can also be on fire. You cannot enter a room on fire unless you have a fire extinguisher, which is an item that helps you put out a fire, or you drink a grog. It gives you the bravery to enter a room on fire. There are also 3 outer hatches from the nearby room, from an adjacent room. It would cost 1 minute to open this hatch and go out into the water. But you can only do that if you have an item called the aqualung. It's usually used to fight the kraken later. So after you move around the sub, then you perform an action. And an action usually is trying to fix something that's wrong with the sub. But actually, at the start of the game, nothing is wrong with the sub. There are still things you can do though. These 2 rooms have red spaces in them. And in these rooms, you can draw items. A gnome can spend up to 2 minutes taking up to 2 grog. If you just want 1 grog, it just takes 1 minute. But then afterwards, you'll move your gnome into this red space to show that they can't do that action again until they do an action in a different room and then come back. Likewise for this room, but this is for general items, and there can be grog mixed in with these as well. In this room, you can spend up to 4 minutes drawing up to 4 item cards. Most of the item cards will help you with various problems that happen in the sub, helping you pump water, helping you fix the engine, the oxygen tanks, the reactor, the missile launcher. You need the missile launcher codes. Also to put out fires or unblock hatches. Most items help with that in one way or another. So let's say for green's first turn, they want to draw some items. So they're going to go here. They're going to spend 1 minute to open this hatch, 1 minute to open this hatch, and let's say 3 minutes to draw 3 items. So they spent 5 minutes total. They didn't drink any grog on their turn, so they don't do a feint check. Then, this time marker, their time marker, catches up to the temporary marker. And every star that it passes, we have to draw an event card. Also, each one of these stars in a gear that they pass, they get to draw a free item. All events are bad. Some of them do nothing, which is what you can hope for. So let's do some events. This first one, reactor warm-up, advance the heat track by 1. Let's talk about the tracks. As I said at the top, if any of these tracks reach the end of the track, the game is over, and all gnomes on the submarine lose. Each of these tracks corresponds to one room in the submarine: the engine, the oxygen tanks, and the reactor. One action that you can do on your turn is to try to fix one of these things. Another event, fire spreads. A fire starts in a room next to one that already is on fire. And there are no fires on the submarine, which means this does nothing. And there we go. That was green's turn, and now it's orange's turn. Still not very many problems yet. Maybe orange wants to get some grog. We're going to bring a few more events in so you can see some of the things that can go wrong. So 1, 2, 3, and they're going to draw 2 grog. So that's also going to be 5 minutes. They didn't drink any grog. Let's get some more events going on. Fire. A fire starts in a random room. Random room means you roll the 10-sided die. 3. There is now a fire in room 3. And whenever you add a fire token, you deplete oxygen. The next event, respite. Nothing happens. None of the events are good, but there's a few of these in there. So it's like, phew, nothing happens. Most of the actions are fix-it actions, fixing some problem on the submarine. There is a problem here in that there is a fire. But actually, Blue, whose turn it is, can't do anything about this. Blue does not have a fire extinguisher or grog, so they can't enter the room. The fire is too scary for them. Blue will have to do some other action. Maybe they also want some grog, so they're going to come in here, spend 1 minute to enter this room, and then draw 2 grog themselves for a total of 3 minutes. Now again, we catch up. Underwater current, flip all low water flood tokens to their high water side. But again, we have no water tokens on the submarine, so that doesn't do anything. Reactor malfunction, advance the heat track by 2. And now it is still Blue's turn. So what are some of the things that Blue could do? Well, Blue has grog now, which means they could enter the room on fire, try to put out the fire, or they could try to fix this heat track. Whenever you fix the machine that's responsible for these tracks, in this case the reactor, this marker gets reset to the previous star. So if the marker was here, it would only get reset to there. But if it's here, it would get reset all the way back. So the players probably don't want this marker to go past this star if they can help it. So that's something that Blue could do, is try to fix this reactor. So he's going to go to the reactor room. That's going to take 1, 2, 3 minutes to reach the reactor room. And now he can try to fix the reactor. Most fix-it actions pretty much all follow the same idea, which is you decide how many minutes you want to spend fixing this thing. And then you roll to see if you're successful. You roll the die, and if the number is higher than the number of minutes you spent, you fail. If it's equal to or less than, you succeed. So you could spend 10 minutes knowing you can't roll higher than a 10 and guaranteed success. But 10 minutes is going to take a long time, and more bad things are going to happen. Fortunately, you can consume items to help you with this. If you drink a grog, it will help any action you do on this turn with a bonus of 3. And some items are specific, like the reactor manual. Perfect. Discard to gain a +4 bonus to a fixed reactor action. Well, that's exactly what Blue wants to do. Blue happens to have the right card right here. A +4 bonus means that however many minutes they choose to spend, they treat it as if they spent an additional 4 minutes for free. You always have to spend at least 1 minute. You could guarantee success by, in this case, using this item and spending 6 minutes. Plus the 4 from the reactor manual is 10, which means you don't even have to roll this. You automatically succeed. And this marker would get reset. But now, more events happen. Let's see what other events we get. He did not drink grog, so there's no feint check. A fire starts in a random room. If you roll a room that's already on fire, you don't add another token, but you still use up oxygen. In this case, oh, this room is on fire. That uses up some oxygen. Respite, nothing happens. In this space, the player can draw a free item. In this case, it's a water pump. And now blue is here. One final event. A leak. A random room is flooded to high water. Now, if it so happens that you rolled a room that was on fire, the water would immediately put the fire out. What do these things mean? If a room is on fire, you can't do anything in that room except try to put the fire out. In fact, you can't even enter a room on fire unless you drink grog for bravery or you happen to have a fire extinguisher, which nobody here has a fire extinguisher. Then you feel brave enough you can tackle the fire. But once you're in a room on fire, the only action you can do is put it out, or try to put it out. If you fail, you will get a free move. Well, it still costs a minute, but usually you don't move after the action. But in this case, you get to do a free 1 minute move out of the room to a neighboring room to save yourself from the fire. Because if you are stuck in a room that's on fire, maybe because all the ways out, maybe you're in a room that's on fire and all the rooms out are blocked, you can't get out. Unless you succeed in putting out the fire, you would die. Likewise, for a room that's in high water, any gnome that's in a room in high water can do no action. In fact, they may drown if they stay there. But fortunately, they can still open a hatch. And one interesting thing that happens, if you open a hatch between a room that's at high water and a room that has no water token, then the water evens out between the two rooms. This becomes low water, and we add a low water token here. And if it was the case that there was a fire token here, yes, the water would in fact put out the fire. Now, low water tokens are not emergencies, although we did see an event that turns some low water tokens into high water tokens, but they make everything slower. Entering a room at low water costs a minute. Normally it's free, it's just the minute to open the hatch. Any action you do in a room that's at low water takes an extra 2 minutes. So if you're deciding you want to do something here, you're taking 3 minutes to get here, 1, 2, 3, and then you're deciding, hey, I'm going to do something else. You would add 2 minutes to whatever action you want to do, however long it takes, because the water, wading through the water just makes everything slower. The only action really that isn't affected is pump water. And again, you can spend from 1 to 10 minutes pumping water. You don't need a water pump card, but if you have one, use it. You throw it away and you get basically 3 free minutes to work on it. He wants to get rid of that water, so he's going to spend 7 minutes to guarantee. Like so. This water token goes away, and again, we catch up. Hopefully we see more events here. This guy should be over here, if I remember correctly. Oh, and look, another leak. Descent advances the pressure track by 1. And here, orange will get to draw a free item. Hey, there's a fire extinguisher. Helps you put out the fire. Another descent. And finally, another descent. So now maybe descent is the thing we care about. Maybe blue will try to take care of that on his turn because he has an engine manual. So let me show you how grog works. Green does not have a fire extinguisher. Ideally, green would open this hatch, which would allow this water to flood this compartment and put out that fire. However, how does he open this hatch? He has to be in either this room or this room. To enter this room, he'd have to open up this hatch, but then the water would flood into this room. Ideally, he would enter this room and then open this hatch. But how does he enter this room? He does not have a fire extinguisher, but he does have grog. Discard and increase your gnome's intoxication level by 1. So green is going to drink a grog. You can do this anytime on your turn, even before movement. So he goes from what's effectively 0 to 1. You have the number facing you to show your intoxication level. The grog goes away. Well, just keep it for the rest of your turn, because any actions that you do right now give you a bonus of 3. So now he opens this hatch, enters the room on fire. He can do that because the grog has given him bravery. And now another minute to open this hatch. And this becomes low water, and this water floods this room and puts out the fire. Well, what else can he do? He may as well do more things. He has an oxygen pump. Maybe he'll reset this track. So 1, 2, 3 to here. And why not? Spend 6 minutes plus 4 for the pump manual. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Guaranteed to fix the oxygen pump. Now, before we have the time marker catch up, because green drank a grog on this turn, we have to do a feint check. The way a feint check works is we flip over the top event. We don't do what the event says. All we care about is the number. In this case, 4. If the number is less than or equal to the gnome's current intoxication level, then the gnome passes out. So in this case, if the gnome was at 4 and we drew this card, the gnome would pass out. We would lay the gnome on his side, and we would move this time marker an additional 10 minutes, which is how much time it would take him to wake up a bit. And when he does wake up, he doesn't reset his intoxication level. He's going to stay that intoxicated. It's going to get worse and worse over the course of the game. Notably, if you faint in a room that's on fire or at high water level, the gnome dies. 4, it's only 1. We're good. That was the feint check. And now, of course, we do more events. A fire starts in a random room. 4. Oxygen goes up. Advance the pressure track by 1. That's getting serious now. Free item for green. It's a water pump. Nothing happens. Advance heat track by 1. Let's find some more events and see what are some other things that can go wrong. Friendly fire. A fire starts in a random room, and another random room is flooded to high water. And everybody has to discard. There's quite a few cards actually that require you to enforce a hand limit, so you can't just draw tons of items and hang on to them. Use them as you get them, because you might have to discard. Here's an example of a timed event. Engine down. So of course you'd be revealing this as a marker is going. So let's say blue is catching up to here, blue reaches this point and draws this card. Timed event, place the crushed destruction token at +10. So we find the crushed timed token and we add it 10 minutes after point where we drew this card. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Let's put it like that, say. Collectively, we as a team have to solve that problem before all our time markers reach this point. If this marker is still here, by the time all these markers reach here, the whole submarine is crushed and everybody dies. But this is straightforward. It's something we want to do anyway. just do a fix engine action in this room. When we do the fix engine action, we would reset this just like normal, but also this marker will go away. Second pass through the deck, you might encounter the Kraken card. That's another timed event. You would add this token and add a plus 15 to whatever event star triggered it. And in order to defeat the Kraken, you need to find an aqualung. If you have an aqualung in your possession, you are able, through either this room, or this room, to exit the sub. Again, 1 minute to open the hatch. Then you enter into the outside water. And then the action that you do is fight the Kraken. And you don't need a harpoon, but it sure helps, doesn't it? That'll give you a bonus of +4 when defeating the Kraken. On your next turn, you have to return to the submarine. Otherwise, you die. And that can be a problem if, for example, all the entrances are on fire. You cannot enter those rooms unless you drink grog, and if you don't happen to have any grog on you or a fire extinguisher, you drown outside the sub. Some other events can include a hatch blocked. Basically, you would roll a random room, 10, and then pick any hatch that's connected to that room and place one of these tokens on it. It is now impossible to travel through that door, unless on either side of the door, you do a fix-it action to remove that token. And again, it's 1 to 10 minutes, but you get a bonus of +3 with the appropriate item, in this case, a crowbar. So you're going to continue like this, hopefully keeping these tracks from getting too high, stopping the timed events as they come out, until we reach about here. 10 minutes to go. Now a funny rule comes into play. It is a cooperative game. We all win or lose together. However, it is possible for one player with an aqualung to turn tail and run. They can abandon ship. They have an aqualung. They're able to leave the submarine. They can't do it too early because they'll drown before help arrives. But at the 10-minute mark or later, they can say, nuts to this, we can't save this submarine. I'm going to take my aqualung and I'm going to leave. You remove them from the submarine, they sit out the rest of the game. And now their victory condition is reversed compared to everybody else's. If the rest of the players fail, they die, the submarine sinks, then this player who escaped would be the only winner, the sole survivor of the Red November. If they're able to save the submarine and survive until the end, then this person will be arrested as a traitor. They lose, everybody else wins. That's pretty much it. It's easier to explain this game by doing than explain all the little rules. Hopefully seeing a bunch of example turns helped you to see how to play Red November.
Red November gives a great feeling of impending doom and a great sense of cooperation. Maybe I have the deactivation codes to deactivate the missile launch, but the room's on fire. And I don't have grog, I don't have a fire extinguisher, but you do. You go before me, you put out the fire, then I go in and deactivate the launch sequence. So there's a lot of cooperation like that. And a lot of that comes down to the time track. It really creates that sense of impending doom, especially when those timed events come out. Right? It's like, okay, yes, the whole thing is sinking. We got a bunch of problems we all have to deal with, but this one takes priority, doesn't it? The time track was a great innovation in Thebes, and the games that I've played used it, which I'm surprised there aren't more. But the games that I've played that used it, I'm a big fan of. Like, I love Tinner's Trail, and I like Red November quite a bit. At least I have a soft spot for it. For one thing, it plays up to 8 players. I'm not saying it's best with 8. If you have 8 players, it's definitely better than playing something like Arkham Horror 8 players, which I have done and I do not recommend. I find that the time track helps with that a bit because the turn order is not clockwise. So if you do a turn and you didn't do much and only took a couple of minutes, you know it's not going to be very long before your turn comes around again. I have played it with 8 a long time ago, and I do not recommend it. I think the highest number I've played that I think everybody had a good time with was 6 players. That's probably a practical maximum. This cooperative game can take a while to play. I forget what the box says, maybe about an hour to 90 minutes. Here's the thing. An hour-ish is a reasonable time estimate, assuming you lose. You don't win until you survive for 1 hour in game time. The thing is, though, is that there's no positive way to win the game. Like in Pandemic, you not only have to survive, treat people and stuff, make sure there are no outbreaks, but you also have to cure the 4 diseases. So like in Pandemic, you could lose quickly, if the outbreaks go out of control, but you can also win, maybe not quickly, but at least relatively so, because there's a positive action that you can do toward reaching the conclusion, and a winning conclusion. Red November doesn't have that. You win if you survive, and you survive an X amount of time. So if you lose, the game's over early, but if you're doing well, that game is going to take longer and longer and longer. And to play the whole thing, if you're playing with like 6 players, for example, it could easily take 2 hours. And I think some people might find it a bit repetitive for a 2-hour experience. Like, I wouldn't say there's a huge variety of events, but they have real world in the game, real world impacts, and they tell a story, right? Like the gnome who was in this room, and there was, there 2 of the doors out the hatches were blocked, but one of them was still okay. That hatch gets blocked, and then the room gets on fire. And then people are like, should we try to save this guy, right? And he can try to save himself, he can try to put out the fire, but if he fails, he's dead, right? Or, I got a fire extinguisher. If somebody can get a crowbar and open one of those doors, we can save him. It's like, should we? Because you don't have to save everybody to win. It's whoever survives the full time in order to be rescued wins the game. So and you can play it such that if somebody dies, they come back in, whatever. I think it's funny that they don't. That tells a story, right? That's funny. I see a lot of comments online, people really talking about input randomness versus output randomness. That's what people call it anyway. Like a game in which you roll a die and that tells you the actions you can do. That would be input randomness. Versus output randomness is where you decide what to do and then you roll a die to see if you succeed. Well, that latter one, that's Red November, again and again and again, right? All the fix-it actions are like that. You are deciding how long to spend, and that defines the odds of success. The longer you spend, the more successful you are likely to be. But unless you spend the full 10 minutes, which is 100%, there's a possibility of failure. And that's going to drive some hobbyists nuts. I guess I can see the problem of wanting to do something and rolling a die and going, To me, that's more of a problem, or at least it feels more of a problem in sort of a competitive game, right? I'll roll a die because I'm trying to attack you or something. You're winning, I'm losing, but I'm going to try to attack you. I built up my army. I have to do this, otherwise I'm definitely going to lose. That guy's definitely going to win. And I roll the die and I just roll crappy dice. It's different in this game to me because it's cooperative, right? And we can all discuss in advance, like, okay, how much time should I spend, right? I'm doing this thing, but that thing is also urgent. Maybe we don't want too many events to happen between, by the time I start and by the time I finish. So maybe we take a chance, see if we can, use a little bit less time and see if we can succeed. If we fail, that's unfair, but kind of life is unfair, right? And it's not in comparison to somebody else who is lucky. We are all unlucky together. A, our decision led to that. We took a chance and it didn't pan out. But B, we all suffer the consequences. So it never really bothered me, but I know it bothers some people, some hobbyists, so it's something to be aware of. For what it's worth, I've never felt it unfair. If I spend 8 minutes doing something and I have an 80% chance of succeeding, guess what? I usually succeed. Once in a while I don't. maybe 1 in 5? That sounds about right, odds-wise. So that's part of the decision making, is how important is this to get right? How should I spend more time to guarantee it, or at least have to increase my odds that it will be successful? Or is this unimportant? I don't have much to do. I'm going to just see if I get lucky with that. And besides, it really feels great when maybe there's a timed event and you only have like 3 or 4 minutes in order to solve the problem, and you do the fix-it action, and odds are you're going to fail, but you succeed. Oh, that's a great feeling, and the whole table is cheering. I will say an interesting thing is that the game doesn't start with any problems. Like, the game starts and it's like, okay, we have to survive for an hour. But we're looking around, it's like there's nothing wrong with the sub. Everything's fine. It's not a big deal. Spend the starting turns, collecting items and stuff while you're waiting for bad things to happen. And you could start, I think it's an official variant in the rulebook, that you could start with maybe 2 events or something, just to start the bad thing, so at least people early on have a little something to do, right? That's not a big deal, but it is a kind of a funny design decision. Of the 2 editions, 2008, 2011, I have a strong preference for the 2011 edition. And I know hobbyists like me who have way too many games are probably looking at this and going, this is amazing. Look at how tiny this box is. This is great. Yeah, it's great for your shelf. But as a game that plays relatively well with a lot of players, maybe not 8, but 6 for sure, playing a large group of people around a tiny little board is just a horrible design decision. So everybody will be crowded around this little board. Or more likely, everybody's spread out and somebody is like, yeah, just move for me, whatever. Like, I don't even see what's going on. I can't be bothered to care. There's another reason to prefer this one. To me, the big thing about this is that the items are cards, whereas in this one, they're tokens. Little square tokens that show the image and a number on them, and maybe an icon, I think, to say like what it's for. So for most items, it's enough to figure out what it's for. It's still nice when you have the item description printed on the card. There is a variant, it's listed in both editions, in which the gnomes can turn on each other. If they feel like we're not going to be able to win, we're not going to be able to survive, then the gnomes can turn on each other. If they have a crowbar, they can attack another player and try to steal an aqualung from them, for example. Funny idea. Everybody's working together until it's starting to look hopeless and everybody turns on each other, right? I think that's hilarious. It doesn't really work super well in practice. In order to escape, you need an aqualung, and honestly, you kind of need the aqualung, right? You need the aqualung to fight the kraken, and if the kraken comes out in like the last 10 minutes or whatever, then okay, I'll use the aqualung instead of fighting the kraken. I'll just escape, right? Yeah, I'll go out and fight the kraken and then just boop, just leave. And in this variant, you're supposed to keep items hidden. But I mean, like, if I have an aqualung, I'm not going to tell anybody what it is. I'm going to keep it secret. And people are going to necessarily be attacking each other, but they don't know who they're attacking. Like, oh, this person has 4 items. I'm hoping one of them's an aqualung and I'm just going to kill him. And turns out there's no aqualung. So I just feel like it's funny. It's a funny idea, but in practice, it didn't work quite as well as I'd hoped. At least how I imagined it. Anyway, if you are interested in that variant, you have to have this edition. It's listed for this one, but it's impractical because the items are tokens, and so you can't really keep them secret. Cards, of course, you can have a hand of cards and keep everything secret. But just having the descriptions of the items on the cards makes this one the way to go, in my opinion. If you think you're only going to play solo, and the game is fine solo, then you can try this. You can try this one because you don't need much space, right? You just have it in this tiny little board in front of you, and you're the only one playing. But if you're like me, you play games with other people, the bigger board is welcome, and the cards are definitely welcome. I want to say one more thing about it. And this is one of the reasons why I have a soft spot for Red November. So, according to the rules, the only action you can do in a room on fire is to put out the fire. But somebody comes and asks the designer, what if I go into a room that's on fire with the express purpose of dying? I go in there to shut down the missile launch sequence knowing I'm going to die. I'm deliberately not putting out the fire. The rules say I can't. The only thing I can do in a room on fire is to try to put out the fire. But I want to be able to go into the room on fire and, save everybody else and die in the process. Is that actually allowed? Because the rules suggest no. And the designer, Bruno Faiduti, replies, "You're right. Technically, according to the rules, you're not allowed to do that. But," and I'm paraphrasing, "that's amazing. That's awesome. I think that should definitely be allowed. Go ahead," right? Because it tells a great story, right? But then the reply comes. It's like, okay, but if I die saving everybody else, do I win? And Faiduti's response is, that's up to you. Do you feel like you won? I personally really have a soft spot for games that toy with winning conditions a bit. So Red November, completely cooperative, but in the last 10 minutes, it's possible for somebody to say nuts to this, and then I'm out of here, right? Abandon everybody else. And then their victory conditions flip. I think that's a really interesting development. And that exchange that I paraphrased to you is another very interesting development. Because ask yourself what winning means, what losing means. My character died. I would go so far as to say that's a loss. Your character died, you lost, but everybody else won because you lost. How do you feel? Does it feel like a loss or does it feel like a win? Isn't that what matters? It's not about writing an L or a W on a piece of paper. Winning is surviving in this game. If you don't survive, you've lost. But that doesn't mean you can't deliberately lose, which would be a crazy thought to some hobbyists. No, you could deliberately lose in this game to make sure that everybody else wins. Or if there's just two of you left, you know what? I'm going to lose so you can survive, so you can win. And yes, I lost. I'm dead. But also, I'm dying knowing that he lived, that he won. And maybe that's worth it. This is something that happens in real life. And these are decisions that people sometimes make. They sacrifice themselves for the greater good, and that's represented in this game more so than almost any other cooperative board game that I can think of. Making those winning and losing conditions something tangible. This is what it means to win. This is what it means to lose. But that doesn't mean you have to go for the win because it's a win. You go for the win because it means you live and you want to live. So your natural inclination is to want to win anyway. But when your desires diverge, when your desire to live conflicts with the desire for as many people as possible to survive, that's a human decision that very few board games put a player in the position of making. Because even though it's a fantasy setting, we're all gnomes, and I'm not a fantasy guy. I know Bruno Faiduti is. I don't know what a gnome is supposed to feel in this situation. But as a human emotion, the human conflict of wanting to live versus wanting to save your friends it doesn't get more human than that. And Red November captures that better than any cooperative board game I've ever played. So for that reason, I still love Red November. It's kind of forgotten about nowadays, and there's lots of cooperative games in the world anyway, so do you need this? Does anybody need anything? But I'm just explaining to you why I don't think I'm ever going to get rid of Red November. I love the emotions that Red November can give you when it's played in a properly dramatic fashion. So I don't think I'm ever going to get rid of Red November. It will always have a soft spot in my heart. Thank you for watching this video and for listening and for liking and subscribing probably, which is a thing that some people do. Do not forget that older games such as the aforementioned Red November do not stop being good because newer games come out. Take care.